And we are joined now by the two senators joining forces on that legislation to protect the special counsel, Robert Mueller, Republican Thom Tillis of North Carolina, Democrat Chris Coons of Delaware. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me right now. And Senator Tillis, let me begin with you right now. You just heard Kellyanne Conway right there. No commitment from the president not to fire Robert Mueller. She says you're going to have to go to his lawyer for that, although she says it's not being discussed. Your legislation would give a judge the ability to review any decision by the president to fire Robert Mueller. Why do you think it's so necessary?
Well, I think it's a necessary part of just continuing to improve the reputation of independence for the Department of Justice. This is something that lives beyond this special counsel. It provides the president with the opportunity to consult with the AG and the Department of Justice, potentially have one removed, but have that subject to a judicial review so that we make sure it's done for proper cause.
And the president is calling, and you just heard Kellyanne Conway repeat it again, the entire Russia story a fabrication, a witch hunt, and a hoax. Do you agree?
I'm not sure that I agree with the witch hunt, and we'll let the facts lead us to whether or not it was a hoax or a distraction. But we are where we are, and I want to see this investigation concluded so that we can get on to doing the good work the president's already started with regulatory reform, health care, and tax reform. This is a distraction I'd like to get past so that I can do as I have, go back to supporting the president's agenda.
Senator Coons, what are the prospects of passing this legislation?
Well, I think we've already heard strong interest from colleagues on both sides of the aisle in supporting this legislation. Senators Graham and Booker also introduced a similar piece of legislation before we went out. And, George, I'll point to you the fact that the president just signed a Russia sanctions bill, one that he initially opposed, but that passed the Senate by 98-2. I think this is also an important bipartisan effort that may shore up the rule of law and the separation of powers and may ultimately get passed.
The president signed that sanctions legislation, Senator Coons, but we also saw that tweet saying that it's Congress's fault, and Kellyanne Conway said he was referring to the sanctions legislation there for relations with Russia being at an all-time low.
Well, I disagree. I think the beginning of a better relationship with Russia is going to be pushing back on Vladimir Putin's aggressive actions. Look, Putin is a bully, and he interfered not just in our elections, but he's also interfering in elections of allies across Western Europe. He's invaded and occupied a portion of Ukraine. He's stood behind Assad and his murderous regime. I think for us to have better relations with Russia, we first have to push back on this bully, and that's what the Russia sanctions bill is going to do now that it's been signed into law.
Senator Tillis, you ready to take the blame for relations being at an all-time low with Russia?
The only reason we have bad relations with Russia is Russia's doing bad things. I agree with everything that Chris said. We are here because of their actions in Crimea. We're here because of their meddling in elections, because they're not necessarily being helpful in Syria. Our relationship with Russia is on Russia. If they want to come to the table and work cooperatively, I'm sure that this president would like that and this Congress would like that. But their behavior has to change.
Senator Coons, we've heard a variety of objections to the special counsel from the president and his team. They've pointed out, they said that Robert Mueller has a conflict because he's a friend with the former FBI director. They say, James Comey, although both Comey and Mueller say it's been a close professional relationship. They say that the fact that several members of the team, of the lawyers on the team, have given contributions to Democrats in the past is signs of a conflict. They also say that if Robert Mueller starts to look at the president's finances, that will be crossing a red line. Any of those concern you?
They don't. Frankly, Bob Mueller is one of the most respected senior federal law enforcement officials in modern American history. I'll remind you, he's a Republican who was appointed by a Republican. And I agree with Senator Tillis, with Tom, that it is in everyone's best interest for Bob Mueller to be able to carry forward this investigation to its conclusion so that we can get back to working in a responsible and bipartisan way to address the real issues facing this nation. It's in President Trump's interest. It's in the interest of protecting rule of law for Bob Mueller to be allowed to continue this investigation to its conclusion.
And Senator Tillis, have you seen anything in this investigation so far that would suggest that Robert Mueller has a conflict?
No, I haven't. I sit on the Judiciary Committee along with Chris or Senator Coons, and I have not seen any evidence to suggest that. And that's why I want this investigation to just follow through to an expedient conclusion, again, so that we can get back to fulfilling the promises we made the American people that the president is already working on. We need to be solely focused on that.
What would it mean, Senator Tillis, if the president fired Robert Mueller? What would the consequences be in your view?
Well, I think it's another example. To me, the reputation of the Department of Justice has suffered some hits in the past. It would just be another piece of fodder or fodder for people who are trying to discredit what I consider to be one of the most important parts of the administration and the FBI within the Department of Justice. I'm working very hard, and I know that Senator Coons is too, to reestablish the integrity of this department, which is critically important to restore the confidence of the American people.
Senator Coons, Republican Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona has suggested that if the president does indeed fire Robert Mueller, the Congress should think about hiring him. Would you be open to that?
I would. I think if the president should fire Robert Mueller abruptly, that would be crossing a big line. And I think you would see strong bipartisan action from the Senate, which might include our reinstating him or our hiring him to continue to conduct that investigation on behalf of Congress.
Let me bring up
George, one thing I would like to put there, though. I don't want this day to become a narrative to where we think that the president is headed in that direction. Kellyanne Conway said that she hasn't had discussions with the president on this matter. Our effort here is just to take that off the table, any sort of precipitous removal. But we don't have any specific evidence to suggest the president is going to do that. This is policy that lives beyond this administration, incidentally, and it's important policy, I think, going forward.
Point well taken. I want to bring up another subject while I have you both, and that's health care. Since the effort to repeal Obamacare has failed, lots of concern that the health insurance markets are going to implode over the next week if Congress doesn't pass bipartisan legislation to keep up those subsidy payments. Your colleague, Senator Tillis, Lamar Alexander, is working on that in a bipartisan fashion. Is that legislation you support and you think the president should sign?
I met with the Senator Alexander and others to talk about what we can do to stabilize the market. I, for one, I think Chris probably had a different view, but I was disappointed that we didn't get the votes to move forward with the health care reform bill a couple of weeks ago. But we've got a destabilized market where insurance rates are going to go up 20, 30, 40% next year. Anything that we can do to prevent that and the damage that will have on people who need health care, I think, is something I have to look at.
The president hasn't committed to keeping those subsidies going to the insurance companies, Senator Tillis. What's your message to him?
Well, the cost-sharing reductions over time need to be eliminated, but we can't just all of a sudden pull the rug out from underneath an industry that's had this in place for about 7 years. So in an ideal world, I'd like to see them go away overnight, but we don't live in an ideal world. If we don't provide some glide path downward, it will have the effect of raising insurance premiums, and that's why we've got to come up with some sort of balance. And I think the administration understands that.
Senator Coons?
I agree with Tom. What I've heard in Delaware is that about half of the projected increase in annual rates is because of uncertainty in the marketplace. And so we need to come together quickly in a bipartisan way to strengthen and stabilize the individual marketplace. We also need to begin working across the aisle to find ways to fix what is not working about the Affordable Care Act while still keeping in place the expansions that made better health care accessible for millions of Americans.
Remarkable amount of bipartisan agreement between the two of you today. Senator Tillis, that's not sitting well with everyone in your base. Laura Ingraham is out this morning with a tweet saying another Republican senator who doesn't understand that there are 3 branches of government. Any response?
Well, the response is the irony in the statement. I work in Congress. I'm a member of the Senate. My job is to assert the authority of the Congress as a co-equal branch. So for that particular person, they may want to go back and study up on Civics 101.
Senators, thank you both very much.
Thank you, George.